Take it, Maestro.
All right. Well, welcome to the podcast. My name is Jonathan Cole.
And I'm Eric Brownson.
So basically what we're hoping with this podcast is to be able to interact with you as much as possible by leaving your comments and suggestions about new topics or the topics we're talking about in this episode or session. Leave your comments down below. Like and subscribe to the channel and like and subscribe to this video. It definitely helps us out. So, just a quick background on myself, because this is the first podcast. I'm an attorney. I practice immigration, Social Security, disability, and estate planning. Those are my three primary areas. I have a master's in business administration and a bachelor's in econ. So you kind of know what my background is, at least when I'm giving my opinions to you on different subjects.
And, of course, I'm Eric Brownson, and I'm a particle physicist. I work on the experiment over in Geneva, Switzerland, but I live here in Chicago. I've been doing it for a few years, and I've got bachelor's, master's, and a doctorate in physics, and yeah.
Sums it up.
Okay.
So today's topic primarily is education, mostly in the U.S., so we'll cover a little bit of international education as well. But what we're going to cover is all of the levels, the differences, and what we think is both good, bad, needs to be changed. If you have an opinion that's different, go ahead and throw it down in the comments below. We'd like to hear your suggestions. So, just to top it off, obviously we both think that education is important for some career paths. We both have higher level educations, and so it was valuable to us.
And
but
I don't know about you, but did you put a lot of thought into how much education you were going to get starting out?
You know, kind of I did and kind of I didn't. So when I started in high school, actually, let me go back to there. I took an accounting class in high school. Mr. Nolan was my professor, and he was really enthusiastic, and so it got me to think, okay, that's a great way to go. Maybe I'll go into the business field, which is why I did a business degree in undergrad. My kind of goal was just to get an MBA. Well, while I was in my undergrad degree, I took a business law class, and that kind of pushed me away from the business side and more to the legal side of the business. And then as my career went on in education, I switched a little bit more to do what I'm doing now. So I wouldn't say that it was super planned out. I knew that I would use something in an educational field in my future, but it wasn't exactly sure where I was going to go educationally. But I knew that I wanted to get at least a higher level degree. How about you?
Well, for me, I knew I at least wanted a bachelor's degree, and pretty much from there, I just literally flipped a quarter to see what to do next.
Okay. And what were your options? What were you weighing?
Well, either try to get a job, doing something with mathematics, or, with a bachelor's degree in physics, you tend to try to go for a higher degree.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. Did you consider any other disciplines than math and physics?
Not really, because I just always gravitated towards math and science.
Okay. All right, good. So one of the things we discussed earlier off camera, but we're going to bring it back up now, is whether or not college is either for everyone or if it's worthwhile at all. And I think that, like a lot of things, our opinion is pretty similar, but I think we'll cover both sides of the subject. I believe we both think that college isn't necessarily right for everyone or useful for everyone, and additionally, the ROI, the return on investment of college, is really not good for most people. So many disciplines in today's college just don't pay like they not necessarily that they should, but they don't pay in accordance with what you're taking out in loans along with them, and the opportunity cost of your time while you're in school.
Yeah, and I think the problem of the return on investment not being as great as it should be, or as historically has been, is really a lack of thought that people put into their educational planning.
Sure.
Like, if 90% of the people go out and just get a bachelor's degree, and the market's flooded with bachelor's degrees.
Okay. No, absolutely. It's a supply-demand issue. So, just kind of breaking off into a subset of facts here. The Bureau of Labor and Statistics, they put out every year a set of statistics regarding two things: the unemployment rates of individuals and at what educational level they have obtained, and additionally their median weekly earnings. So the most recent that we have right now is the year 2012. and they rank their categories from doctoral degree, professional degree, master's, bachelor's, associate, some college with no degree, a high school diploma, and less than a high school diploma. And so I'd like to discuss kind of both of those areas quickly. So when you look at the way the unemployment rate goes, as you get a higher level of education, your unemployment gets substantially smaller. So the unemployment period, or the unemployment rate, goes down. In a doctoral degree, it's 2.5%, a professional degree, 2.1%. Just jumping down to an associate's, it's 6.2%. You get only a high school diploma at 8.3%, and then less than a high school diploma, it's 12.4%. Okay, so you can see the substantial decrease in unemployment, and then it goes in the opposite for the median weekly earnings for those years. So less than a high school diploma, your median weekly earning in 2012 on average is $471. Now if you look at workers all across America, it's $815. So it's almost double, the median is almost double what less than a high school diploma's earnings are. So you can see that the payoff there, your ROI, is so substantial to just get the high school diploma. Where if you have a high school diploma, it's $652 a week. So it's much, much closer to that average. An associate's degree still is below your average at $785, and it jumps above average then at the bachelor's degree. So you can tell, median-wise, you do earn more with your bachelor's degree. That's kind of where the split goes into. But then from your bachelor's on to a master's degree, it's a very small increase to $1,300 a week. A professional degree is $1,735, and a doctoral $1,624. And so you have a little jump there again if you're going to go on for a professional or doctoral degree, primarily because it's so specialized and there's such a small number of individuals who have that still. I think that throughout time the level of education has increased. There's been a push on education to individuals, to young students in high school or grade school. Parents pushed that on them, particularly those who came over and are now first generation Americans. Where their parents came over, I think that that's the path towards the American dream. So I think you're getting a lot more bachelor's degree, which results in market saturation.
Right.
You want to kind of explain market saturation, just in case everyone doesn't know what that means?
So there's so many jobs out there, and they require so many workers, so many skilled workers to fill them. Well, if there's 100,000 jobs and you train 150,000 people, then 50,000 people are going to be either unemployed or underemployed. These are the people, well, I shouldn't mention where they're going to end up working, but they'll be the people that are waiting tables, and they really do have an education.
Sure, absolutely. And you'll see too, if you just ask, you have a conversation with people who are waiting tables or working in retail, many of them have bachelor's degrees, and the jobs that they're in don't require that. There's no advantage for having a bachelor's degree to meet the qualifications of that job.
But I think, you mentioned the qualifications to meet the requirements of a job. I think that's an important thing to highlight here, because there's a lot of jobs out there where an associate's degree really meets those qualifications.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of areas where you do need some education beyond high school, but a bachelor's degree may be too much.
Right. No, I agree. And the thing about it is, let's just say that you don't want to necessarily go into a field which requires, and I don't mean like, it's preferable, I mean requires a bachelor's degree. So that's not for you. You want to go into a field where an associate's degree might be enough, or no post-high school education would be acceptable. In those particular fields, I think that there's a strong discount against either personal individual learning or learning later on. So let's say you have a desire to go into a field, like I opened a law office, but let's say you have a desire to go into a field of landscaping, and you really have a passion for putting in waterfalls or water features in people's homes, or that's what your passion is. In that particular career, there's no need. You're self-employed, so there's no need for a higher level of education. What that doesn't mean is you can't either self-educate or you can't get an education later on in life. And I think that's heavily discounted. Once you get an education later on in life, you're looking for different things out of your education. And so I think that you're looking at the ROI differently than maybe an 18-year-old boy or girl might be looking at the education.
Oh, that's definitely true. Uh, when you see people go back to school later in life, they do it for a very, very targeted purposes. And I think that's a very wise thing that people do
Oh, absolutely.
later in life.
So then you look at the two costs of education, and I think people kind of discount one in favor of just the second. So the first cost is what I put the most value on, is your opportunity cost. So you're an 18-year-old, you graduate from high school, and you think to yourself, what do I want to do? Well, you're not sure, so you go to college.
Right.
You have 4 years of college, and of course everybody says, oh yeah, the tuition, the books, the room and board, I have to have all that financial outlay. But they forget what I think is more important is the opportunity cost of those 4 years. So in addition to paying, let's say on average, $15,000 to $20,000 a year for school, they're also losing, let's say, $15,000 to $20,000 in income. So the actual cost of that, just 1 year, not including anything else, is $40,000. If it's $20,000 they'd have earned and $20,000 in costs, so that's $40,000. The other thing to take into consideration is if you work for those 4 years, you're gaining 4 years of seniority as well.
Yeah.
And so you're becoming educated in that field through experience and practicum, and you're being able to bump your pay rate up based upon that experience, or find employment with someone else who will compensate you for that experience. So that opportunity cost is huge that you're missing out on with school. And obviously going to school myself, I had to make that trade-off. But I'm 30 years old, and I've only been out for 2 years because I've had 3 years of law school, 2 years of my master's, and 4 years for bachelor's. And so that's all those years that I both lacked experience in the workforce and missed out on earning an income in addition to paying for schooling.
Yeah, I'm 33 now, so I guess I graduated, 5 years ago? So I would say that my college, it's the better part of a decade.
Sure.
Yeah, so 10 years of earnings
Right.
lost for school.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is the thing. I think that in 1980s, early 90s, even late 90s, education was a much more difficult thing to obtain on your own. So if you wanted to learn something, I remember in school you'd pull out an encyclopedia, you look up the issue you wanted to learn. Or if you really wanted to learn something, you'd find a targeted book on that issue. Obviously with the internet, that's not needed anymore. All you need is a connection, and you have access to pretty much any subject you want to learn in. Whether that be a high-tech subject, like coding or computer programming or, website building, or it could be a low-tech subject like landscaping and the proper rocks to use for soil integration,
Right.
or the proper fertilizers to use and why they are. You can look all of those things up for pretty much no to low cost.
Right.
Some websites have a pay to gain information. You can get scholarly articles. And so really your only barrier to knowledge is your ability and desire to read. As long as you're willing to read, there's nothing you can't learn if you're self-motivated.
Yeah, and that kind of touches on another area of education that's really undergoing a transformation right now, is just the access to information is so greatly increased. And the access to even high quality professor talks online is unbelievable right now. There are so many online courses out there. I don't know if I've ever told you this, but actually I'm taking a few.
Are you?
Yeah, for computer programming.
Okay, what are you taking?
Well, right now I'm going through one on algorithm design,
Mm-hmm.
because as a physicist, most of my programming skills are self-taught, so I've got big gaps in my programming abilities.
Now, is that through an educational institution then?
It's through a website, and I can't think of the name right now, but the professor is at Stanford.
Okay.
Who's
So do you get credits for those classes, or is that non-credit classes?
So the one I'm taking, I think they will send you a certificate if you complete the class itself and do some online quizzes and assignments and
Okay.
things like that. But I signed up for the class just to get access to the lectures,
Okay.
because I need to go through it when I have time to do it.
Sure.
So I couldn't do all the quizzes in a timely manner. So I signed up for the class, was able to download and access the lectures online
Okay.
and the notes online, and then I'm just going through those video lectures one by one and taking notes as I go,
Sure.
just to teach myself, because it's stuff I want to know.
Oh, sure, absolutely. And I think that's something else as well. So in my field, I spend a lot of time reading, both to stay current on the law, but in addition to that, just to stay current on general events, because there's a pretty big impact on general events in what I do. Recently, immigration-wise, we had something called deferred action for childhood arrivals, which allowed people who are young when they were brought here by their parents to get not a path to citizenship, but you have to not only be aware in situations like that of the changing law, but also the change in the structure of immigrants and how they're coming to attorneys, how they're not. So I just have a personal interest in that kind of stuff. And so even in a non-structured organizational class, you can stay on top of subjects or learn about subjects via the internet in ways that you couldn't pre-internet. And so I think that society puts an overemphasis, they overvaluate formal education. I think informal education has a lot to offer. And so I think that we will, in the future, I mean prediction-wise, see a decline in the formal education for a lot of fields, and there will be a few fields that are very specialized, which have formal education.
Yeah, and I think that touches on another part of what we wanted to talk about today, is really the targeted aspect of education, as opposed to the general, what is that called, with where they study general topics.
Liberal art education.
Liberal arts, yeah,
Sure,
sorry.
absolutely.
The liberal arts education in a bachelor's degree right now is basically what a high school diploma should be.
Right, right.
And I think schools spend way too much time in trying to make balanced students, that they don't target what they should be targeting.
Right, no, absolutely. So I think one of the things we spoke about prior is limiting course curriculum. You look at, in my opinion, maybe 8th grade and beyond to high school, a full liberal arts education is not as valuable to those individuals, I don't believe, as a more targeted education to fields which have potential for jobs. So let me give you kind of a synopsis on that. When you're going through your grammar school educations, there's a real value on some history, on some U.S. law, Constitution. There's a real value on some of the soft sciences. But the higher up you go in an education system, the mathematics, the hard sciences, English, writing, the ability to articulate your thoughts in written communication, as in addition to oral communication or video communication, I think that's where it should go. And I think that there should be an emphasis in schools on those things. And the soft sciences, and I'm a music person. I play bagpipes, I play violin, I play oboe. It's fantastic. But to have those as focuses in schools where there's a decreased number of jobs in those fields, I think that places a strain on the general majority of the population. Or if you have them as high school electives, I think that would be a beneficial thing.
Well, see, I kind of have an opposite opinion. I really like the liberal arts nature of pre-college.
Well, you're entitled to your wrong opinion.
Of my wrong opinion, yeah. I like the general round liberal arts education of high school.
Okay.
I mean, I think that, an 18-year-old really doesn't know what they should be targeting by then.
Okay.
By 18.
So you're telling me you think it's valuable to have English lit for sophomores in high school?
Yes.
So you think Shakespeare is going to provide them something down the road?
Well, I don't think Shakespeare is going to provide anybody anything, because I don't like Shakespeare.
Okay,
but like Voltaire maybe.
Okay. So I mean, this is going to have to be where we disagree. There is no value in teaching classic novels. There's no value in teaching that to high school students who will not use that in their day-to-day lives. There's an aesthetic value, a beauty in those type of things. It's no different than the beauty in music, no different than the beauty in theater. But in the ability for that individual to make their lives and their families' lives better, it's a very rare circumstance that they'll take advantage of that. And so that's why I kind of felt that to be in more of an elective style class.
Well, I consider like the classic novels to be understanding a historical perspective and being able to see a perspective that's significantly different from your own.
Okay.
You know, reading The Three Musketeers, learning about some guy sword fighting his way across France, you know.
Okay.
That's just a significantly different perspective from what I'll ever see.
Sure, absolutely.
So I really do concede the need to put an emphasis on that, because it teaches you a way to look at a problem that's going to be different from anything you would normally consider.
Now, I think that a differing perspective in looking at a problem is valuable, but I think that can be gained in other ways. And I think that it's not necessarily the school's job either to teach that. I think that differing perspectives probably runs onto the parent's role, or the parent's choice in enrolling your student in an elective set of classes, which I think kind of transitions too quickly, but without going too off, into your ability to choose your child's education.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of goes into the voucher system as well. So, you know, in a public school education system, they have these targeted things that you must have, where it's a little bit less structured in private schools. You can have private schools that have emphases towards certain
Mm-hmm.
paths of employment.
Right.
And so that'll give choice on what's a core competency class and what's a elective style education. You can let the market decide then where it wants to put its resources. But no, I'll go back. I'll let you go on to why you think that
well, because you know,
the literature is the way to go for different perspectives.
Because you know, the point of a high school education, of a grade school education, is to provide some base foundation from which you can go on and pursue your life. So, you know, when you're going through school, you need to understand how you should read a book, the type of things you should focus on when you read a book, so that, you know, hopefully 20 years from your graduation date, you're still reading books.
Sure.
So hopefully in 20 years after you graduate, you can read a book, focus on things that are important, be able to discern the filler from the important parts.
Sure. No, but do you think that by 8th grade you shouldn't have those skills already?
No, I don't think.
Really?
I don't think people do, and I think that's a skill that those skills are something that continually develop, even today.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Your ability to read and decipher. But I kind of believe by the time you're in 8th grade, you're at a point where you should be able to handle the fundamentals of reading, to be able to have reading comprehension.
Yeah.
You should be able to determine how to value what you're reading and place emphasis on the reading material itself, looking at the sources, the value of that source. And when you get into fictionalized stories, that's an elective. It's not needed. Because our goal, and see, I think this is where we differ necessarily with an emerging power of China. China doesn't place emphasis on that crap. China says, look, you are going to be productive. There are too many people in this country to not be productive. We're going to place you in an area where you're going to be productive. And that's why they are becoming a productive country. Where on the other hand, we're kind of enjoying the cream of what luxury we've made, and now we place emphasis on these electives where we get to think and feel and have arts. But
yeah, but if you look at societies in general, you know, going from, you know, Roman times to the Renaissance to now, like, big jumps in a society in general have always been from well-rounded individuals.
But do you think maybe that had a portion to do with religion as well? So I think potentially they were well-rounded because the arts allowed them to sneak some sciences in. And arts were still okay by religion standards, but science was not. So I think the society has changed to a point where we don't allow religion to limit sciences, and as a result, society can grow without necessarily having strict arts.
Yeah, but I think good science is an art in and of itself.
Oh, absolutely,
Like
absolutely.
if you look at people who write really good computer programs, it's an art the way some people do it.
Absolutely.
I'm certainly not as good as most people, but probably shouldn't say that on a blog where my future employer may be looking at it. But I'm trying to get better, trying to learn some of these fancy techniques.
Okay.
The
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think if a parent has the ability to choose for their child what they want their child to study, do you think they're going to place them in an arts program or in a math and science program?
well,
Unfortunately, though, don't consider that people are stupid. Just
well, yeah, that's a whole nother story.
right.
But I think parents are going to choose math and science.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And why is that? Go ahead, where I'm leading you.
Because it's what society needs.
No, because it's more valuable. Period. Why is the price of a diamond more valuable than the price of a ruby?
Probably market manipulation.
Maybe. But scarcity is bad for both.
Yeah.
The reason that a diamond is more valuable is because it has more practical use.
Right.
There's more value attached to it. Just like there's more value attached to math and sciences. How do we know? Because the marketplace is higher wages on those jobs because there's more value to society in those jobs.
Yeah.
I think that we can only have arts when we've been able to achieve so much production in math and sciences that arts can live off of the fat.
Yeah.
And I think that I'm not discounting the value of arts. Obviously, I'm a musician. I enjoy theater. I enjoy all that, that good stuff. But you can't have that without the core production and efficiency that math and science provide.
Well, there's two topics. We could go from there, but the first being getting back to the topic of should the emphasis still be, should you be able to split off your core course of study in high school or before?
Okay.
And the other one is what society places an emphasis on and what we need more of in society.
Sure. Okay.
But I still do think that for a well-rounded high school education, you have to have the good liberal arts
Sure.
aspect of it.
All right. Well, I'll agree with you, but if I did agree with you, we'd both be wrong.
Yeah.
I just tease you, man.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go into just a little bit now of student loans and what we're going to do with all of the money. So student loans obviously have risen each year. USA Today kind of put a study out there, and in 1993, the average borrower debt was $15,073, okay, for that class. The class now of 2011, which is the most recent that they have, is $27,547. So we've almost doubled the amount of debt that an individual has with a bachelor's degree. That's just, it's a staggering amount. And there are classmates that I have who have $250,000, $300,000, $400,000 in debt. So,
Well, in the sciences, once you get past your bachelor's, they pretty much pay you to go to school. So
right.
in the sciences, you tend to have just that bachelor's load.
Sure. But in other fields, you do have additional on top of that. But if we just limit it to bachelor's, so you come out of school and you're stuck with $27,547 in debt. So you come out and you want to get a job, but a good chunk of the money that you would be putting towards retirement or putting towards a home or a family is going to be going towards repaying those student loans.
Yeah.
That value, I think that college students now are more cognizant of how much debt they're taking because they see class after class being swallowed up by debt. And I think that mantra is beginning to change. but I think for a while it wasn't, and so students were kind of graduating, not anticipating the burden that debt would place upon them.
Yeah, the student loan debt, it really is a bubble that's just, I don't know if you could say it's popped or starting to pop now. And years past, people just loaded up on debt, didn't think twice about signing that loan form.
Sure.
All that money goes straight from the bank to the school.
Right. Well, absolutely. Do you think that you're going to start to see a decrease in the number of individuals applying to schools because of that?
I don't think you will, actually.
And why do you think that?
I think people are so enamored by, getting the idea of getting a bachelor's degree that people are still going to just load up on debt.
Sure. Interesting thing just regarding that, the Huffington Post put out a study, and it says that if a student has $53,000 in outstanding student debt, and according to them, that's what the average student loan balance for a family headed by two people with 4-year degrees, it'll be about $208,000 poorer over a lifetime than a similar household with no debt. So if you take that average family, $208,000 is how much more they're going to have to make at minimum just to not have it both individuals go to school. According to this study, $208,000 is how much they're going to have to make over what that other family is.
Mm-hmm.
That places a lot of burden on both individuals working, not having one person stay at home.
Yeah.
And so by having every individual in a married couple go to school, that places a burden on the ability for a stay-at-home parent.
Right.
And I think that's going to alter significantly in the next 30 or 40 years how children are raised and their attitudes towards that.
Right. Well, of course, I'm against pretty much all forms of debt. The one exception being buying a house. I think that's kind of a big ticket item that you need a little bit of help on to get.
Okay.
But all other types of debt, I think people should stay away from them. Steer clear of them at all costs.
Okay. So even school debt.
School debt, I think people should try to stay away from too.
Okay. So you think if someone's family can't afford to pay for them to go to school, they shouldn't do it?
Well, I think they need to rethink what they're going to school for.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of lower cost options. I had family members that spent time at community college before going to a 4-year school. And I think the level of education you get from the first 2 years of school is pretty much equivalent, if not better.
Okay. So we spoke earlier, not in the podcast, but about having differing borrowing amounts depending on what your major is. Right now, it doesn't seem as if there's any fluctuation in the amount of loan you can get that relates to your major. So if you go to school for basket weaving, your loan will be identical if you go to school for advanced mathematics. Do you think that that's correct? Do you think we should alter that?
Well, I think you definitely have to have some market forces feedback in earlier on in the education process. We talked earlier about market saturation of bachelor's degrees. Well, if the market was saturated with a certain type of bachelor's degree, then that fed into the student loan process or the student scholarship process in such a way to discourage people from that particular field. I think it would correct the market. There would be a certain amount of market correction that happens there. And I don't mean to sound like cavalier, like, people shouldn't go into a field that has a lot of people working in it, but I think people who go into that field unnecessarily and end up underemployed, I think they would have been better off doing something else.
Okay, I think that's a fair assessment. What about this? This is something else I kind of wanted to cover for today. Do you think that the educational system treats boys and girls differently?
I mean, it's hard to say it doesn't, simply because of a lot of the disparities between the sexes in math and science.
Okay. How about in school in general? It used to be, and I don't have the statistics in front of me, but it used to be that schools were a majority of male. So and it was substantial. It was like 80, 85, 90%, something along those lines, were male enrollment. Where now most educational programs, maybe math and science accepted, and they might even be changing, are a majority female enrollment. So law schools are a majority female enrollment right now. Lots of fields like business administration are gaining either 50% female enrollment or more a majority of female enrollment. Why do you think that is? Because I kind of have my opinion, but I'm curious to see what you think.
About
why you're seeing a majority now of, why it hasn't just equalized, why you're seeing a majority of female enrollment.
I'd have to think about that for a little while.
Well, I have my theory, and my theory is that right now grammar schools are, well, even high schools, but grammar schools primarily, are giving emphasis or majority treatment to female students. A majority of elementary school professors or teachers are females, and so they learn and teach in similar manners that females are accustomed to. I think men and women both learn differently. Men, I think, or boys, learn in a more hands-on approach. They're more rambunctious, and they learn in a more rambunctious manner. Where females learn in a more oral tradition, just generally. And I'm not saying this holds true for everyone, but I think they learn more in an oral tradition. And so teachers, being primarily female in the elementary school level, teach primarily to the oral tradition.
Just teaching the learning style.
As a result, I think that young ladies are learning and scoring higher because they're absorbing more of that information. I think that they're doing better on tests there because they're more apt to learn and retain knowledge that are taught by female teachers. I think that it used to be they still were learning better prior to this fundamental switch, but women were not encouraged to go on to higher education. And so those numbers were being artificially held down because of social stigma. Women are encouraged, if you go to school, you need to go to be a teacher, you need to go to be a nurse, one of those kind of quintessential female professions, where now some of those barriers have been broken and women are now going into other disciplines. So I think if you want to even that out, I think that there should be an encouragement for men to teach some elementary school education. When you go to an elementary school, there are so few male teachers that they're almost a rarity. Of people that I know, a majority of the elementary school teachers are female. And I think that some young men or boys miss out on the ability to learn to their style, which is a more hands-on, rambunctious style. And they're missing out some.
Well, I would definitely agree with you on the historical perspective of traditionally why women didn't pursue higher education, the social stigma attached to it. And it's definitely true that there are a lot of female teachers, and we do need to encourage men to go into the teaching profession. But I don't necessarily agree that it's the teaching style itself as to why there's the increased number of females going into college and beyond.
Okay. So what do you think is the reason for it then?
Well, I mean, honestly, I think guys just do stupid things.
Okay.
So, just as a sex, men just do a lot of stupid things, and there's a lot of professions out there that men can go into without a college degree.
Okay.
And I think there's, maybe I can't say that, but
okay, go ahead.
Because I was going to say that maybe there's more areas that men can do that without a college education than women, but I guess that's really not true.
Yeah, for the most part, I wouldn't say that there is.
Right.
I'd say it's relatively equivalent.
Yeah.
But I do think that teaching style certainly plays into it. If you look historically, boys students will get in trouble in school, and that's a discouraging factor for them in pursuing education. or in a male classroom, at least my experience has been that boys who are a little more rambunctious, a male teacher either can handle that more, I wouldn't say efficiently, but on a more personal level because they experienced that themselves when they were young, and so they're more relatable to that educational style.
Relate to it,
They
right.
can alter their teaching plan or the curriculum of the course to focus boys' attentions in a different way than girls' attentions are focused in school. And I think because of the lack of primary school male teachers, you see that. But I think that in the same ways that females in the 70s, 80s, and 90s were pushed towards the female education sector when they went to higher education, that kind of worked in the converse where males were not encouraged to teach primary school because it was viewed as a feminized profession.
Well, taking care of the kids, that's
Right.
a woman's job.
Absolutely. And so I think that there needs to be almost an inverse incentive now for schools to encourage males to teach that level of education. Because I do think that by having a close to equal number of male and female teachers at that level will benefit, particularly boys in school, but I think girls will somewhat benefit from as well because they'll be a little bit exposed to that style of teaching, which they're more statistically going to get in high school and primarily in college. There still is an overwhelming number of male professors in college, where in grade schools there's an overwhelming number of female teachers. And so I think that on all levels a little bit of equilibrium in both will.
Yeah, I definitely agree that we need more balance between the two at all levels.
And now I think we kind of got that subject beat, but I want to go finally to the last thing, which is a little controversial, and I want you to for sure comment down below on this subject, and that regards to paying college athletes. So there's a ton of discrepancy right now on whether college athletes can make money from signings, from having their names in video games, from the broadcasting rights to the ticket sales. And the views kind of go like this, if you'll let me summarize. The NCAA, which runs college athletes, or the college schools that run athletes, sets up rules that are like this. They say the athlete is getting training, the athlete is getting education, access to facilities, and that should be all that they need because their focus should be on education. Conversely, the athletes and their families say the school is profiting, the NCAA is profiting hugely off of their actions.
Insane amounts.
And so consequently, they should be able to receive a portion of that amount. Okay. If you look at states, a majority of states in the United States, I think it's 48 states, a coach at the collegiate level is the highest paid government job. A coach, a college coach, whether it be basketball or football, is the highest paid job for the state. So let's say U of I's basketball coach, or Madison, Wisconsin's football coach, or they're the highest paid public
employees.
The bowl games, the Rose Bowl, the Orange Bowl, huge money makers. The games by EA Sports, the NCAA football games, the basketball games, they're using likenesses of these students. Yet when the student tries to profit at all by signing autographs, something with their name on it, they get dinged by the NCAA. What do you think of the arguments? Do you think the NCAA, obviously I think our opinion is clear just in our tone, that we think the athlete should get something.
Yeah, they should get something because the school's profiting off their talents and abilities.
Right.
And I don't think the students are getting what they deserve for those abilities. So many people are making so much money, and to explicitly forbid this one particular subset of people, the people with the actual talent, from gaining from it, I think that's pretty obscene.
Do you think there's any argument, though, that the NCAA has that once you start paying those students, the education doesn't become of value to them?
Well, I would wager that it's not as valuable as the NCAA leads us to believe anyway.
Okay.
When you look at the graduation rates for college athletes and the actual majors of college athletes, I don't think they're placing an emphasis on the education aspect
Sure.
of it anyway.
Sure, I think that somewhat depends on which athletic discipline as well.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, there are some athletic disciplines which are not money makers where I think they force their students to do
Right.
more educational work than others.
Right, yeah,
Um,
clearly there are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I definitely tend to agree with you. But I do think that if you look at, I think even if we pay the athletes, and I think that that should happen, there should also be some requirement, because most of those athletes, even if they're phenomenal, you look at college basketball athletes from Duke, you look at them from Kentucky, you look at them from all those big schools that are just pumping out phenomenal basketball players. Not all of them who are phenomenal basketball players are going to make the NBA, are going to make professional.
Yeah.
And now they've had these 4 years where, I hate to say it, but even in college, they're very immature.
Yeah.
They don't have a fallback option because all they have is a degree that's going to get them in the door. But they haven't learned anything, and so it's not going to give them sustainable employment because they didn't learn the skills. So I totally am in favor of paying the athletes because I think they've earned a portion of that income.
Yeah.
But conversely, I think that there needs to be some way to ensure that they're both in a rigorous academic discipline while they're there, and that their GPA is not artificially inflated to get them what they need, but they have some way to say, if I don't make it, if I get injured, you could be the best basketball player in the world, the best football player in the world. You could get injured, and
Yeah.
you're done before you ever get a paycheck from baseball, from football, from basketball. And now what fallback do you have because you didn't focus on education? So I totally think that they should get paid, but I do think the NCAA does have an argument in that the emphasis still needs to be on education.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how do you propose we fix that? I know I just kind of dumped it on
Well,
you, but do you think there's a way to do that?
Well, I think, it needs to be a gradual process. I mean,
Okay.
you can't just unilaterally say, okay, everybody can play their athletes now. Even if you started as a baby step of, say, providing some sort of insurance for the players. I don't
Okay.
know, maybe they have it already, where if a player gets injured, then an insurance policy kicks in
Sure.
that the university paid for, to pay for their education.
Right, right,
And to keep that going.
right. Absolutely.
So
or maybe
I-
a stipend to begin with for the students,
Yeah.
to cover.
Yeah, or some stipend at a low level. I mean, even if it's the same stipend that schools pay graduate students.
Sure, absolutely.
I mean, are we going to say that you can't pay graduate students because they're getting an education?
right,
No, you wouldn't say that because people need something to live on.
right, absolutely. No, that's true. I don't know if I have the solution, but I do think that there needs to be, and whether it's just that they have to have a core set of knowledge in order to compete for that year. So if you're a freshman and you're in a particular discipline, you must have taken a core set of classes, and you must have achieved a core set of grades on it, and maybe some NCAA individual goes over those grades to make sure that the school isn't artificially
Mhm.
inflating grades for athletes, so that they're not just enrolled in the class and getting a passing grade,
Right.
but that they're absorbing the knowledge that's needed. I think that that's one of the things schools in general, not just for athletes, are just striving, because it's, I don't want to cover too much. The cost of tuition has tripled the cost of inflation. So schools exponentially are more expensive than inflation should say they should be.
Right.
With that, though, they're not emphasizing, because the profit is so high, the attainment of knowledge. They're emphasizing the attainment of a degree, like the piece of paper is worth anything.
Mhm.
The paper, in reality, offers no value. It's the knowledge that the paper represents where the value is. And I think that both educationally and for student athletes, that's not where the focus is, but should be.
Yeah.
So maybe you want to summarize our topic today for the viewers. And again, I want to thank you for watching. I really appreciate
thank
it. Comment, like, subscribe down below. Everyone helps us out a bunch. And if you have topics you want us to discuss, please put that down in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.
So I think the main thrust that we talked about today was, focusing on education, planning your education, not having it accidentally happen. Like, it can work out for you that something accidentally falls into your lap and your education turns out well. I think pursuing an education in and of itself is very important, but it needs to be targeted. It needs to be working towards something, not just, oh, it's the next thing I should do
Absolutely.
because society says I should do. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for watching. We look forward to seeing you next time.
Yep.
Good night.
Good night. Yeah, that's fine. One thing we didn't really cover too much is, the effect that student loans had on.
Yeah. We're already at 15
housing
minutes.
loans, yeah.
So,
Well, I figured we'll cut it down.
I mean, just
Yeah.
leave it right at it.
Just leave it.
Yeah, just leave it right at
That's a
it.
scary thought.
Why not?
Well, I've never seen one, so I don't know what's the more normal thing to do.
They leave it right at it.
Really?
They cuss up in them. So they leave it right at it.
Okay. No.
Let's make sure it's
Oh,
saved.
yeah.